If you go to his website, rdwolf.com, there's a search bar there. If you put the word Yugoslavia in the search bar, you'll never find anything about Yugoslavia.
Yeah, which I think if you go to most, I've been checking the Wikipedia pages. If you look up this autogestion self-management, they do give you some examples of where they claim this has been tried, right? So they at least put Yugoslavia on there, but Wolff does not. So this is why I say, maybe mixing the metaphor a little bit, he's not the Cadillac of left-wing economists. He's the Yugo of left-wing economists. Yugo, of course, being a not-so-great car. It was a third-hand knockoff of a Fiat 124 from Italy. So this was not a great car. So he's the Yugo of economists. Now the example
and Noam Chomsky's in the passenger seat of the Yugo because he's right there with it. He calls it anarcho-syndicalism.
Yes, anarcho-syndicalism.
He does refer to autogestion.
That's exactly what it is. Anarcho-syndicalism. And again, you find this especially in Southern Europe and especially among people who are peasants. Now, the idea that we here in the United States should attempt to revert to an anarcho-syndicalist mentality, I think this would be awful. You're right. Noam Chomsky is riding shotgun in the Yugo with Richard Wolff.
Well, these guys like Noam Chomsky, Gar, Alperovitz, and Richard Wolff always say the same cliches that Washington is broken or the workplace is broken, and the main issue is forming the concept of capitalism. But you're also going to hear Washington is broken, that language you're going to hear out of the mouths of the Koch-funded candidates like Ben Sass, who were fighting in Nebraska. They never take aim at Wall Street.
All Wall Street politicians say that the government is broken.
Right, Washington's
my answer to that is Wall Street is broken. The government would be okay, but Wall Street is broken, and it's sucking in all the...
well, that's the same thesis of Richard Wolff and Noam Chomsky. Washington is broken.
Yeah. Let's focus on Wall Street, gang. Huh? That's, again, it's just like with Grillo, right? Where's the attack on the bankers? And not just a verbal attack, but where's the proposal to hit them in the labanza, right? To cut them down to size, to tax them, to regulate them, and make sure that it's a way that's going to help people. Richard Wolff is a great troubadour of the phrases of something called Mondragon in Spain. Now, Mondragon is what? Mondragon is a town in the Basque country. So it means northeast Spain near the French border, right? Near Bayonne, Hendaye, these places, right? The Basques, right? So this of course, has been the location of this ETA, right? Harry Batasuna, the independence movement of the Basques, need I say, sponsored by the British from time immemorial. British not necessarily doing a whole lot with it directly today. We don't know, right? You don't hear much about this, but just that's where it came from. So Mondragon is also a company. And Mondragon is, they have several thousand employees. And this is supposedly an example of a self-managed entity, right? It's an autogestion company. Now, I would just like to cite a scholarly study here. The only scholarly study in English is called The Myth of Mondragon, Cooperatives, Politics, and Working Class Life in a Basque Town by Sharon Kasmir. It's SharrynKasmir. Now, this lady is the professor. I think she teaches in the New York SUNY State University of New York system. I'll check that. This is somebody who went into it with the idea that the self-management system, and she started her research, right, is the answer to the predicament of modern humanity. And her finding is that it's not. In particular, she points out the workers of Mondragon are more passive, more apathetic, more listless, less mobilized than workers in similar companies in similar places who have a union, and there's a clash, right? In other words, there's management and there's a union, and they fight. At least sometimes they fight. When the contract comes due or to get a contract, they have to fight, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas at Mondragon, they have these factory councils which are management and labor together, supposedly discussing what's going to be done. But as this lady Kashmir, Professor Kashmir points out, the management methods at Mondragon are not materially different from other similar companies that are supposedly, old style capitalists. They still operate, say, under the European Central Bank, under the European Commission, under the euro, right? Spain has had this terrible economic collapse. This self-management has not made any difference. And indeed, one of the big parts of Mondragon has just gone bankrupt in the last 6 or 9 months. And this is called Fagor, Fagor. Fagor was the kitchen appliance division of Mondragon, and it went bankrupt, and it has now been liquidated. And that's a couple of thousand jobs that are kaput. They're gone. And the interesting thing was there were demonstrations in Mondragon by the workers of Fagor, in other words, part of this conglomerate, self-managed. The Fagor people were there saying, hey, Mondragon executives, save us, merge with us, arrange us a loan, do something. And the answer was nix. There was no help for them. So what does this say, right? Is that working class solidarity? Is that the best we can do? Does that seem to be leading the world out of anything? I would urge people, take a look at this Myth of Mondragon by Sharon Kashmir, and you will see the inherent bankruptcy of what Richard Wolff is proposing. And again, he won't tell you about the Yugoslav experience. The Yugoslav experience is that widespread adoption of the worker self-management method leads to a bloodbath, to a civil war with horrible atrocities, concentration camps. Now, that probably wouldn't happen everywhere, right? This was superimposed on a mosaic of already existing ethnic conflict. But certainly this is no model. And then there's Mondragon. That looks like a failure. I believe Professor Wolff is associated with the praise of the Legge Marcora. This is extremely obscure, so you have to bear with me. Now, here we are in Italy in the 1970s, and there was an Italian politician by the name of Marcora, and this is a funny coincidence because I knew Marcora. What I was trying to do was, along with the political movement I was in at the time, was to organize Italy to declare a debt moratorium and escape from the International Monetary Fund system. And on this basis, I went to see the guy who was at that time the Italian agriculture minister, Giovanni Marcora, Marcora. And he was not willing to do anything for this. But it turned out that in 1972, this same Marcora he had sponsored a law which goes something like this. If you have, I believe it's 10 unemployed people, if they get together and form a kind of consortium, they can ask the unemployment office to pay them their benefits for a year in advance with the idea that they're going to form a business which would presumably be self-managed. And I have been trying, since I saw this a couple of weeks ago, I've been trying to find out, has this had any effect? In other words, has this led to self-managed businesses? How many people have taken advantage of this, right? How many of them survived, right? Because, it's the hardest thing to do is to start a business, right? A lot of them fail. The main thing is that the decline of the Italian economy since then has been huge. In other words, if you just look at the last 10 years, Italy has declined relative to its previous levels as much or perhaps more than any other European economy, right? That's the despair. The despair that gave birth to Grillo is precisely this, right? That there's economic degradation. So I think I'm on firm ground in saying that the Legge Marcora has had absolutely no effect in propping up the Italian economy or slowing the rate of depression or anything of the kind. And this guy at the time, he was so, I don't want to go into his agricultural policies. The word was that his agricultural policies were based on manure, but we We used to call him Maporka. He's not Marcora, but Maporka. Unfortunately, he died some years ago. But this is not a good guy. This is not a good law. I don't see how you can come forward seriously with this stuff. So, again, suffice it to say, this local organization, this self-management, this is the opposite of class-wide, right? This creates local chauvinism of the most extreme kind, not that kind of nationwide, class-wide vision that you're going to need, and indeed a worldwide vision. And again, if you're in Europe, you can forget nation by nation. That's just gone. That was gone 50 years ago even, but it's gone. It's even more gone now. And here in the U.S., you got, if you don't have some idea of Europe and some idea of Japan, at the very least, you're going to go nowhere.